What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to yet another edition of Touchline Talk right here on 110 Sports. So much to get to today. These Champions League games have been fascinating, these last three in the quarterfinals. And every time it felt like we had sort of reached the pinnacle of what we were going to see in this round, you got something even stranger, something even more interesting, it seemed like. You start with Atalanta almost beating PSG, then you go to what Leipzig did, then you've got Bayern's destruction of Barcelona, and then Lyon's upset of Manchester City. It just continued to build. This was a fascinating set of quarterfinal matchups, which is going to leave us with a great set of semifinals starting today. Super excited. I have so many thoughts on some of these things, so we're going to jump right into it. Our first five, as normal, and we're just going to start and go in chronological order of these last three Champions League quarterfinals. I'm not really sure what Diego Simeone was doing. Why is João Felix not starting this game? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I understand he's not had the best season. He hasn't really lived up to his price tag. He's struggled with injuries, hasn't produced at the level that Atleti would want him to, considering the money they spent. But you buy a player like that for games like this. If you're going to spend that much money on a guy who doesn't actually fit your system and isn't a traditional Simeone player, you got to use him in these situations to make a difference in a game, and that's exactly what he did when he came on. That first half was absolutely played to Atleti's liking. It was just beautiful for Simeone. Nothing was happening. And while that is good for a certain extent, you can still do that with João Felix on the field. It's not like that one player takes away your ability to do what Atletico Madrid does as well as anybody in the world, which is just make things ugly and annoy you. But two, credit to Leipzig, they just sort of kept trying and they never stopped playing. Atleti was able to ground the game to a halt in the first half, but Leipzig never got away from what they do. They never stopped trying to play the way they want to, trying to bring that energy, and so they find a goal. And then all of a sudden you're in big trouble because this is Atletico Madrid trying to play from behind. So that's when you bring in João Felix. João Felix immediately makes a difference and ties this game up. But you left it in the balance, and there comes Tyler Adams. Lucky deflection, but it was a good shot. That's why you put shots on target. And all of a sudden Leipzig are through. I just find it hard to believe that Leipzig is sitting here getting ready to play in a Champions League semifinal if João Felix starts this game. Because you're not losing that much defensively. But what you're gaining is the ability to make a difference in attack from the start of this game. And, Atleti just had nothing going forward. And a lot of that was due to the ridiculously good performance from Upamecano in the middle of that Leipzig defense. I know he's only 21, but to me, he's already a world-class center back, and I absolutely think he can get on Virgil van Dijk's level. Maybe it's a little premature to say that, but he just bottled up Diego Costa. It's remarkable, and for the amount of teams desperate for elite center backs right now, it sounds like Leipzig's going to be able to hold on to him for another year, but there are just only a handful of guys who can do that from that position. Probably Koulibaly, obviously Van Dijk, and then you start running out of names. He is sensational. And so when you allow him to be able to control a game and to just lock you down, that's where you need João Felix, because João Felix has the technical ability to make a difference there. But Simeone just didn't play him until it was a necessity because they were losing by a goal. If you get that goal in the first half and you score the opening goal, all of a sudden life is much more difficult if you're Leipzig and you leave yourself exposed because you got to throw more bodies forward to try and get the equalizer. It wasn't necessarily a tale of two halves because it's not like Leipzig absolutely dominated the second half, but they started to get a little momentum, started to get some rhythm, were actually able to play a little bit, and they just sort of stuck with it. And when you get that conservative, and we're going to talk about this with Manchester City too, but when you get that conservative, there's a price to pay. And so now an Athletic team that looked like they had a path to at least the semis, if not the final, that some thought were favorites to win this whole thing are going home. And here stand RB Leipzig without Timo Werner because they have a system, they have a defined style of play, and they didn't get away from it. So, shouts to Julian Nagelsmann and that team. It was just a fascinating game, and you know, you got to ask questions of Simeone, but at the end of the day, this is not Real Madrid, this is not Barcelona. It's not like you can go say, well, they should be making these deep runs to the Champions League every single season, and that losing this game is this crushing disappointment. To me, it's more disappointing just because of the way it happened, not necessarily that they lost, if that makes sense. That you gotta hold on to them. You gotta do everything you can to keep this together. They're still a very good team. They just quite weren't at it, and João Felix didn't click this season. And so you leave yourself in this position, you make some bad decisions, and you pay a price. And then we get to what happened to Barcelona. So the first thing here is that this was coming. Now, I didn't expect it to be in this extreme of a scenario or this bad of a beatdown. But you look at what happened the past couple seasons in those second legs against Roma and against Liverpool. And you saw how fragile this team can be. Then you look at what's happening at the board level and the top of this club. And you look at just the chaos that has sort of ensued after this loss and the fact that Setien was never able to get this team to buy into what he was trying to do, really, and that Messi was clearly unhappy. And you look at their poor run of form coming out of this restart in La Liga. Messi himself is enough to get you through Napoli, a Napoli team that was disappointing this season. But he's not good enough to get you past these dudes at Bayern playing like this. It was just a masterclass. You can't sort of continue to cover these cracks with Messi. And I think that's basically what we learned. There was going to be a moment of reckoning coming where it sort of fell apart. And we got it in a very, very powerful way thanks to Bayern. But you're just at another level when you're playing against this team right now. And Barcelona just clearly wasn't up for it. And from the Bayern side of this, you look at the difference between this year's Bayern team and this Bayern team under Hansi Flick, more specifically, and the frustrating team that was never able to live up to its potential under Niko Kovac. The difference is that Thomas Müller is back in the lineup. Kovac basically sent him to the bench and said, you don't have a spot on my team. And Thomas Müller said, fine, watch what happens. He's not a traditional... He's in this awkward spot because he's not a striker. He's not a traditional 10. But he's just phenomenal at linking play. And you saw the chip he had for, the second goal? He's creating assists like crazy. You just got to put him in the center of the field and let him go to work. It doesn't matter that it's not traditional. It's super effective. He's also sort of the last one of these guys who, born and raised Bayern, understands this club's identity, has the expectations and the standards that he holds himself and his teammates to. He's in many ways the heart and soul of this team now, with some of your Philipp Lahms and Bastian Schweinsteigers and such leaving over these past handful of seasons. He's sort of the lone holdover from those great, the treble-winning Bayern team and the German World Cup team, and Jerome Boateng too. But to me, that's when you look at what's different with this team, it's that Thomas Müller's getting to do his thing, and I feel like to a certain extent, I was doing this too. That people were writing him off, and it's not like he's 34; he's still in his prime. And we were looking at he had to leave to get playing time, and Hansi Flick said, "No, I know how good he is," and that's what you're seeing is that he just unlocks defenses for this team. He is so good in an unconventional way, but you just can't argue with it. You got to keep rolling with him. He's great. He's one of the best creators in Europe, and has shown that since he's gotten to be able to go back into the starting lineup. And the other of the many standout performers for Bayern in this game, I mean, Alphonso Davies is just incredible. He controlled the entire left side of the field. all Barcelona's attacks were going on the opposite side, where Joshua Kimmich was playing right back, because they just weren't getting past Davies, and then Davies dusted Nelson Semedo to set up that goal. I mean, he's incredible, and he's only going to get better. It's remarkable. Those are the two things that have changed for Bayern. I mean, I certainly didn't think Alphonso Davies was... I was skeptical Alphonso Davies was going to be able to actually make a career at Bayern. I thought he might be one of those guys who goes out on loan a couple times and then ends up somewhere else in Europe. Not that it was a bad idea to make this move, but I wasn't convinced that Bayern actually had him in their long-term plans. They had him in the short-term plans. He's just incredible. And so now finally Barcelona, it appears, is going to have this sort of moment of truth and the internal recognition that they got to do this differently. They can't continue to try and hold on to these older players and continue to expect them to do the same things that they were able to do 5-10 years ago. Messi is still ridiculously good, but Messi is not quite the player Messi was, and Messi doesn't have any help right now. And so you gotta just start this thing over from scratch. And part of the problem is that these signings are not working out. It was fitting that Coutinho came on and made such a difference for Bayern and produced goals against Barca. And you got Piqué saying he's willing to leave if that's what it takes. Ousmane Dembele hasn't worked out. Antoine Griezmann has not. Maybe he finds a way. But Luis Suarez is now on the radar of Ajax. It sounds like he might be gone. And I think that's what you got to do. You got to just sort of clean house. You got to hope that you can move your director's vote up and just get new faces in everywhere this little break you have before the next season starts. I don't even want to call it a off season or whatever because it's so short. But I think it's almost a blessing in disguise for Barcelona that it was this stark and this humbling. That's how far away they are. Now, I would argue that Bayern was pretty much that far away last year too and turned it around that quickly. It's not like they can't do it, but you got real questions, and Messi, at least in certain situations or certain circumstances, depending on how things play out, wants to leave. It's that bad. He knows he can't do this by himself anymore, and I don't blame him. This club has failed him. That's the bottom line. So if that, you would think that would be the strangest thing that happens in a set of 3 games, but Lyon goes out there and says, yeah, watch this, and takes out Manchester City. First of all, yes, Pep overthought the lineup, the tactics. Again, this just seems really strange to me that a guy who's so adamant in the way he wants his team to play changes the way he wants his team to play in these huge moments time after time after time, and especially after it has failed time after time after time. Because all he's doing is just inviting criticism to himself. If you go out there and you put your best 11 players on the field the way that in the lineup they've been playing, in the system they've been using this year, and you lose this game, you're going to get criticized because you should beat Lyon, absolutely. But he's just inviting another round of criticism for going and playing Eric Garcia ahead of Bernardo Silva, Riyad Mahrez, David Silva. You go down the line. He's just making the problem worse for himself. And it's to the point where these players are losing confidence and just confused about why they change what they're doing in the biggest moments of their season. I don't understand what he was trying to do. And from a tactical standpoint, the problem that City ran into by playing 3 at the back and by taking another midfielder out and playing both Rodri and Gundogan with just De Bruyne as the attacking option is that you didn't have enough runners in the box. Because now you need De Bruyne to be facilitating everything because you don't have Riyad Mahrez or Bernardo Silva there to help with that. It's just De Bruyne and Silva and Raheem Sterling, pretty much. And so City had some opportunities in the first half, but there just weren't enough players in the box. And what do you know? You start bringing in guys because you're losing. You bring in a Mahrez, and all of a sudden De Bruyne finds himself on the edge of the box in that area where he's so good and where he usually ends up. Because there are other players that can go make those runs, that can stretch the defense, that can go get the ball that Sterling went and got. that can take defenders away and allow that run to happen. That's what part of what makes Manchester City so good is the ability to have these elite attacking options both in the midfield, out wide, and up top. And they didn't have that when you play three at the back and you play two holding, what are essentially holding midfielders. That part of it never made sense to me. They were playing to Lyon and this idea that Lyon could hit them on the counter with pace. And if you're Manchester City, you just can't be playing to a team that didn't qualify for Europe. I mean, you just can't. And not even that, but you basically can't be changing your tactics, your ideas, your philosophy for anybody. If you want to be the best team in the world and you want to win the Champions League, you got to be confident enough in what you're doing to play your game. I was just incredibly confused, and it happened to Pep again, and it backfired again. Real questions have got to be asked about this. It's just not good enough, and they're putting themselves in bad spots, and that starts with the manager. I understand why these players are losing some faith. It's just shocking to see this happen over and over to them. But not only do you have the tactical questions, you had some careless mental mistakes from the guys out there too. And we've seen that this year. They've just not been quite at their sharpest. And so you have these weird moments where things backfire and they're not quite good at finding a way to sort of overcome that adversity. And Pep's talked about this for years. Things sort of implode and it snowball on them very quickly. So you give up those couple goals. And that Raheem Sterling miss. I mean, this has been... First, I'll say that Raheem Sterling has been immensely improved in his finishing these past couple seasons. He is a terrific player. But there are still moments, and you even saw it in the Amazon documentary about their, record-breaking season. There was a moment in there where Raheem Sterling missed a sitter, and Pep said, you just got to finish that. You have to finish that. And this was another example. So even as he's improved and become one of the best attackers in the world, and arguably the best English player on the planet, he still has these moments. And it's just, you have to, there's nothing else to say. You have to finish that chance. You have to. It makes things, it changes the complexion of the game. And when you're good, your defense makes a couple mistakes, your manager gets it wrong tactically. If you want to be the best team in Europe, that's where you got to find a way. And I give credit to De Bruyne, because De Bruyne seems like the guy who just can make something out of nothing and get this team back into a game when it's down and out. And it just doesn't seem like the attackers, for the most part, have that ability, at least these past couple seasons. And, Sterling has had a couple late winners, but a lot of what he does is sort of off-the-ball movement and just intelligence and being in the right spot and getting those easy goals. To get to that next level, he's got to finish every one of those and continue to build on his more difficult finishes, which he's gotten much better at, as I said. This is not the same player that came to Manchester City. This is not Raheem Sterling of 4 years ago. But you got to finish that chance. So it went wrong in every spot for City. They didn't play well. They had too many self-imposed mistakes. And you got it wrong from the managerial level. This is what you're spending the money for. You got to find a way. I still am started trying to process exactly what happened here. Just incredible. I have more thoughts. We're going to save them for a little bit later in the show. But congratulations to Lyon. They're playing with house money and still in this thing somehow. It's incredible. Europa League wise, Sevilla, Inter Milan are your two finalists. These are teams that are going to the Champions League next year anyway. We talked about on Thursday how good Sevilla is in this tournament. And was not a spectacular performance from Sevilla, but two Manchester United mistakes, they're able to capitalize on both. They're able to overcome an early Bruno Fernandes penalty kick, which Manchester United seem to get every game because that attack is so quick and there's so much pace. It's not like maybe they get a call here or there, but most of these are just because people can't stay in front of them. they really are that good going forward with that young trio. And so Manchester United just keeps pummeling the net. Bono stands on his head. It was a very resilient performance from Sevilla, and they took their opportunities. That's at the end of the day, Manchester United just couldn't finish. They had some good chances. It's not like they played poorly, but it's just one of those games where you feel like you're unlucky, you're the better team, but a couple moments turn the game, decide it, and it goes Sevilla's way. So to me, as a United, from the United perspective, it's one of those games you just can't be too upset about. It's in the Europa League, which it it only means so much if Manchester United win the Europa League. And again, it's not like it was a bad performance. It's not like they didn't have ideas going forward. It's another example of you still need to find ways to be better defensively, and that Lindelof Maguire pairing is still not up to par. And you saw Lindelof and Fernandez get into it after the second goal. But it's not the end of the world. I'm not concerned about it. It doesn't change the way I feel about United going into next season. Disappointing, sure. Will you also take the little bit extra break before you get going again? Absolutely. I don't have deep conclusions or long drawn out conclusions based on this game from United. Sevilla is really good in this tournament. Sevilla puts a focus on this tournament. And they're just a good team. And so you had two good teams playing each other. And one of them had to lose, and United was just unlucky. Team not so unlucky. Well, Shakhtar was unlucky to have to face Inter Milan. Inter win 5-0. Was not close. Absolutely dominated. There's not much to say here. They are just clearly the better team. That's not a bold statement in any way, shape, or form. They get the job done. Antonio Conte's done a great job there. They are really coming into their own at a perfect time when Juventus is struggling. So there's your Europa League final, Sevilla, Inter Milan. The other thing I wanted to mention before we take our break and sort of revisit some of my bigger takeaways from the Champions League as a whole, what we saw. Dallas and Nashville played again to sort of make up these games they lost, not getting to participate in the MLS's back tournament. And after the yelling from the stands, the throwing things from the stands, the fan who got ejected, Dallas decided to keep players in the locker room. I talked about this at the NWSL Challenge Cup. To me, this is something that I'm not surprised by at all. I think it just makes the most sense, especially because this is what, at least in this situation, the players wanted. And maybe different players are in a different headspace here. Maybe some teams don't want to do this. I don't want to speak for everybody and say this is some sort of consensus thought or opinion here. But Reggie Cannon was saying, we asked to stay in the locker room from the beginning of this thing. And now Reggie Cannon, for just saying that it's disgusting that he's facing that much hatred from his own fans, is receiving death threats. It's just awful. I think this is I think this is the easiest solution, at least temporarily, is to just say teams aren't coming out. As long as that's okay with players and you're listening to players. But my bigger plea here, my bigger frustration is just please listen and respect people's right to peacefully protest. I'm not here to tell you what to believe, what to think. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything anybody is doing. But can we please just make our players feel safe? I mean, my goodness. Reggie Cannon is a stand-up dude. He's trying to make the world a better place the best way he knows how, the best way he can think of. And it's just really disappointing to see what this has turned into. And so I didn't want to ignore this. To me, it's that big of a deal. It's something the league's going to have to continue to focus on moving forward, especially because there are at least some other teams that are trying to get games with fans at some point. And of course, we're going to return to fans in stands in the future as well. Who knows what society looks like at that point. But I think this is just your best option to keep players in the locker room, because nobody should have to endure what Reggie Cannon has endured. It's just incredibly disappointing. Please just listen, respect people's right to protest. It's what this country is about, is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and being able to do that even if not everybody agrees with you. Reggie Cannon's just trying to express himself and try and make the world a better place. I'm always going to go to bat for anybody in the sports world who's trying to do that, whether, in this case, it's not particular to Reggie Cannon or that I disagree with him, but whether I agree or not, I think we just need to appreciate and respect people who are willing to use their platform to try and do good. And Reggie Cannon is absolutely trying to do that. It's just awful what this has turned into, and the backlash and vitriol he's faced. So I didn't want to ignore that. Of course, there's a lot of Champions League to talk, but I wanted to bring that up as well. It's something to keep an eye on as MLS moves forward, and just sports in this country move forward. That's it for our first segment, our first five. When we come back, a couple more bigger takeaways from the Champions League. Also sounds like Barcelona has their coach lined up. We're going to talk about that, as well as why happiness is not the only thing money cannot buy you. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. As I said before the break, I have a couple more bigger takeaways I wanted to talk about from these Champions League quarterfinals as a whole that weren't specific to the games individually. We've all heard the saying, money can't buy happiness. I would also like to suggest that money cannot buy Champions League success. Ask Pep, ask PSG if money can buy you Champions League success. Manchester City have not reached the semifinals of this tournament under Pep Guardiola, and he was brought in specifically to win this tournament. PSG have failed time and time again until they finally found a way to almost blow it again this year, but get through against Atalanta. My point is simply that, yes, of course, having boatloads of money to spend on the biggest players in the world makes you much better and gives you a chance to win this competition. I'm not trying to say that Manchester City should go back to what Manchester City was before the ownership group and Sheikh Mansour came in and all that. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that if you think that you can just go buy a team, put it on the field, and it's going to be able to beat really good team after really good team, you're just wrong. The mental aspects of this, the psychological aspects of this, the ability to execute is crucial as well. And this particularly goes to Manchester City against Lyon, right? That was just a mental failure and a mental lapse of concentration for Manchester City. I'm not trying to draw any broad conclusions here, but you can't just throw wads of money at this thing and then think you're going to be able to actually win. Yeah, I can get you through the group stage. I can get you through the round of 16 pretty easily. But when you then are you're facing a Cristiano Ronaldo, a Messi, a Bayern Munich, a Liverpool, the list goes on. That Ajax team last year. There are teams that are more cohesive, that know who they are, that understand what they're doing, that are confident, that have a stronger culture. And that's going to win out at least some of the time. I'm just a big believer generally. You can't win with just talent. You can't win with just culture. You need a combination. But I want the culture over the talent. I know it's cliche, but I really believe it's true. And you saw it again with Lyon. That you have to find a way to change the mental part of this. It's one of the most underappreciated aspects of sports. That's how you're going to get over the hump if you're Manchester City. It's not that Lyon was just ridiculously good in that game. It's that Lyon was mentally tougher. Lyon didn't make mistakes. Lyon didn't panic when Manchester City got an equalizer. And they just kept going, and when Manchester City made mistakes, they capitalized on them. And Raheem Sterling missed his golden opportunity. When you're playing at this level, that's the difference. Money can't completely compensate for that gap. You got to be able to execute. You got to be able to mentally be the better team. And I think that's a lot of the other part of what you've seen with Bayern this year and why they're better. It's also a mental thing. It's a mindset thing. And part of that is bringing Thomas Mueller back into that team, who understands what it takes to win at the highest level. He's done it at the club level and he's done it at the international level. When you lose those kind of players, it can hurt you. He sets a standard in that club. And so now you're seeing it again. I don't know what else to say about this other than of course it's disappointing to see this much money get thrown around, but for all the complaining people do about PSG and Manchester City and Leipzig to a certain extent, although it's not just about the money, the reality is that you can look at that roster and say they're going to win the Champions League every year, and they haven't. That I think we get too caught up in the money sometimes. I'm not trying to downplay it as much as to just say you got to look at the bigger picture. Money is not going to... You cannot spend your way into a Champions League title. You can spend your way into a team that's good enough to win one, but you've got to find a way to do it mentally as well. And that's part of what makes Ronaldo and Messi's teams and why La Liga has dominated this competition. And you can throw Atletico in there too. Look at who's winning this thing. And then Jurgen Klopp with Liverpool, right? You get to one final, you lose it in crushing fashion because you made some mental mistakes, but he has instilled that culture and that resiliency in that team, so they come back and they're still the reigning champions until we get a new one here at the end of the week. That's the missing part of this. I just think Liverpool's a perfect example, and Bayern to a certain extent as well. You need the talent and the money and the resources. Klopp had to be able to go buy Van Dijk and Alisson. But it's also the mental, the leadership, the cultural aspect. And that's what Manchester City and PSG have been lacking. That's really all I have to say about it. But money can't buy you happiness. Money can't buy you a Champions League. It's got to be more. There's a mental side of this that we need to pay attention to. Also, what a showing for CONCACAF. Alphonso Davies just destroys the right side of Barcelona, controls the game. Dust Nelson Semedo, as I said before. And Tyler Adams scores a game-winning goal for Leipzig to send them to the semifinals in their first, deep Champions League run. Both those guys not only played in MLS, but came through MLS academies and are, CONCACAF internationals. Davies for Canada, Adams for the U.S., obviously. And the player that set up Tyler Adams' goal was Angelino, who played for New York City FC on loan for Manchester City. He went to their MLS club. Now, it was a short-lived thing. This is more about Davies and Adams. And the bigger point I want to make is the academy point. That these young players coming through MLS that are coming through academies, yes, you've had your examples of DeAndre Yedlin and Miguel Almiron, and you know the list goes on of those younger, specifically the South American, and obviously Yedlin's American, but your Miguel Almiron example of the South Americans who are now coming in. Diego Rossi is going to be the next one, of viewing MLS as a step to Europe. And part of it is just this league embracing the idea of being a selling league and being willing to let those guys go. And European teams understanding that the talent in MLS is real and they can attract the better players from South America that are on the rise and want something different before they move to Europe. But you're also going... This is just the beginning of this pipeline that's going to come from these MLS academies. It started with Alphonso Davies, who's just another level talent. But Tyler Adams, grew up through the Red Bulls and is now at the pinnacle of the Red Bull system. But the next group is here. It's Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie at Philly. It's what FC Dallas has going. I'm mentioned Reggie Cannon. Reggie Cannon is going to be on his way to Europe at some point in the near future too. You're starting to see these academies produce the kind of talent, and Weston McKennie came through Dallas's academy for a little bit. Chris Richards as well. You are going to see this, that some of these guys are going to be willing to stay in MLS because you can get the opportunity to play at 19, 20, or in Alphonso Davies' case, 16. Get that playing time, get those professional minutes under your belt, and now you have European scouts who are paying attention to you, which is a lot of what you saw at MLS's back. And to me, that's a big change. It's not just that there are young players coming through this league. It's that these academies are producing talent, and Europe is paying attention for what seems like the first time ever. Not that there weren't an example here or there, but there's a group of guys that are coming right behind Alphonso Davies now throughout the league. It's I specifically mentioned those two teams, but other teams are producing academies as well. Gio Reyna played in NYCFC's academy. They tried to keep him. Europe knows what's up, and MLS is on the rise in terms of international pedigree. And I sort of believe this from the beginning. It's not, yes, it's nice to have a Zlatan or a Rooney in your league or whatever, but the way to build the stature of this league is to go develop talent that Europe wants and to be a selling league, and then to use that money to bring in higher level players and reinvest in those academies to get the cycle and to become essentially a version of Ajax or something, one of those teams that Southampton, these teams that identify and produce talent that's on the rise, knowing they're going to have to sell it, but using that to make their team even better and continue to sustain success. To me, that's what MLS should and can become, and we're on the path. And what happened with both Alphonso Davies and Tyler Adams this weekend was just another example of that. Also mentioned, Barcelona seems to have a new coach because Quique Setien was never going to survive that beatdown. And it appears to be Ronald Koeman. It's not official yet, but all reports are saying it's Koeman. I feel comfortable enough to give some thoughts on this. From his perspective, as messy as this is going to be and as difficult as a job as Barcelona is right now, this is Ronald Koeman. Ronald Koeman can't say no. It's his dream job, and it's probably not going to come around to him again because somebody's going to have the courage to take it, and then you're going to rebuild, and it's going to be back to what Barcelona was 2 years ago or whatever. If he wants this job, he has to take it now. From Barcelona's perspective, I just am not sure he's the guy, but I'm also curious to see who turned this thing down and what their process was and their order of operations in terms of talking to people. Because if Poch said no, and you're not able to go get a Jurgen Klopp or somebody right now, Pep doesn't want to come back, then you're very quickly running out of options. And the idea of having a guy who's familiar with the club is obviously appealing. And Koeman's done a good job with the Netherlands. But all Koeman did was get the Netherlands back to where they should be and where they were. This was a country that was playing in World Cup semifinals and World Cup finals and European semifinals that was a top 5 team in the world the first half of this decade. And then they just crashed. And he's brought them back to relevancy and back to qualifying for these tournaments they should be in. When you have Memphis Depay, Steven Bergwijn, Virgil van Dijk, Frankie de Jong, Matthias de Ligt, the list goes on and on. It's a very good job. He took it in a bad spot and was able to turn it around. Full credit to him. But it's got to be catastrophically bad for the Netherlands not to be playing in Euros and World Cups. They belong. And so the question is, can he sort of actually rebuild something instead of just hitting the reset button? Because it's not just getting more out of these players at Barcelona, it's redoing the whole thing and bringing in new ideas, new faces at a club that expects to win every single season. When Koeman was at Everton, it was 24 wins, 20 losses, 14 draws. Not exactly inspiring. That's the biggest job he's had. He had some big ones in the Netherlands as well, but so he hasn't proven he's comfortable at the highest level. I just have real questions about this. From his perspective, I understand why you have to say yes. And maybe Barcelona just couldn't get anybody else. Like I said, I'm really curious to see what comes out about how this went down. But I just certainly hope that they made Mauricio Pochettino say no. And that they exhausted some other options instead of just turning to the Barcelona guy. Because this is a big task, and I'm just not sure he's up to it. Okay, when we come back, all things Champions League semifinals, talking keys, injury updates, all that good stuff, and what's next. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Touchline Talk here on a Champions League Tuesday. We're going to get right into what's next. this afternoon, it's all about Red Bull Leipzig, PSG. Some interesting storylines here for a variety of reasons. One is simply that Thomas Tuchel was Julian Nagelsmann's coach, and Nagelsmann's managerial career in a lot of ways has Tuchel's name written all over it, and he has Tuchel to thank for the fact that he's now in the Champions League semifinals. Tuchel was the one who, Nagelsmann was dealing with injuries, and Tuchel basically said, you got to go scout for us because we can't afford to pay you if you're not doing anything. And that evolved into an opportunity, and now here he is as this young rising star who's going to have whatever job in the world he wants at his fingertips at some point. So that part was really interesting that, these guys go way back, know each other really well. In terms of a key here, I'm looking at Leipzig's press and how effectively PSG can handle it. Atalanta's press was really good in the first half against PSG in the quarters, and PSG just sort of had to play direct, and they weren't able to build from the back the way that most of these really expensive, talented teams want to. So Atalanta did their job in the first half, but that doesn't mean that they stopped PSG. Neymar should have had 2 goals. There were openings, and Atalanta, scored, had some chances. There are openings going both ways here. So if PSG can handle this press and this high intensity and pass through it, they're going to rip Leipzig to shreds, unless Upamecano can be something even more ridiculously good than he was against Atleti, which might not be humanly possible, But on the other side of it, if Leipzig can just get a couple turnovers off this press and get a couple chances, PSG's defense is there for the taking. So that's the key from a tactical perspective I'm looking at. And the other benefit that PSG has here that Atleti didn't, PSG's strength is its wings and its width. Which means if you're putting Upamecano in the middle of a back 3, he's not the one most of the time that's going to be dealing with Neymar, Mbappe, Di Maria, so forth and so on. That if you can survive without a Icardi that PSG was able to against Atalanta, then you're going to be your more dangerous options are the ones that aren't specifically going against Upamecano, which is the opposite for Atletico Madrid, who are trying to play, especially when you don't start João Felix, trying to play everything through Diego Costa. So that's another thing to look at is, what can the other defenders of Leipzig do to handle these world-class wingers that are going to come at them. Sounds like there's a chance Kylian Mbappe starts. Tuchel's thinking about it. We'll see exactly what happens. Who knows exactly where he is health-wise. He's going to play a big role. He's available. He's feeling good. Sounds like no Marco Verratti again, which now that you have Angel Di Maria back and Mbappe is going to be available, it's not that big of a concern for me. If you don't want to start Mbappe, you just put Di Maria on one side, Neymar on the other, Icardi up top. You bring in Mbappe for Di Maria or for somebody else if you're losing. It's a nice little option here that Tuchel has and the weapons at his disposal. No Keylor Navas in net. He came off injured and is not going to be good to go. So, Sergio Rico, like I said, Angel Di Maria is back from his suspension. So you're not going to have as many disappointments and frustrations up front with the exception of Neymar. There's not going to be as much pressure for Neymar to convert his chances and do everything by himself because he's going to have more weapons to work with here, especially if Mbappe starts. So that's good news for PSG. I think PSG win this game. It's just a lot to ask for Leipzig to do this again. And this is a much, I don't want to say worse matchup for Leipzig because they were able to make Atleti uncomfortable and take them out of their game in the second half. And so that really benefited them. You're playing a similar team here in PSG. This should be open. This should be really fun to watch. And in that kind of situation, I'm going with the favorite, with the better players, especially without Timo Werner there to cause some problems and stretch this defense. I just think PSG is going to have too much. and they already got a scare, so I would certainly hope they come out ready to go and don't take this team for granted. I just think it's breaking right for them. I like this matchup for PSG. Again, the wings not having to deal with Upamecano for the most part. I just think this sets up nicely, so I'm saying PSG win. And then our second matchup tomorrow, Wednesday, August 19th, Lyon, Bayern Munich. If Bayern didn't need any more hope, Benjamin Pavard is recovering, and it sounds like he might actually be able to start this game or at least play some role. If he starts, that means that Joshua Kimmich slides back into his midfield spot. You probably take out Leon Goretzka, and all of a sudden Bayern is even that much better because Kimmich is a midfielder. He can play right back, but that was where you saw Barcelona, the success that Barcelona did have. It was coming on his side of the field. It wasn't against Alphonso Davies. It just works better when you can have Pavard playing it right back. It provides a better balance. It lets Kimmich do his thing, get up the field more, connect passes, do all those things he's really good at. And so, if Lyon needs even more bad news, other than having to play the most informed team in the world and clearly the best team left in this competition, they might get their starting right back into the fold as well. And my key going along with that is, can Lyon attack the right side of Bayern's defense? You're going to have a tough time against Alba and Davies. They've just been excellent since that partnership was established. Your strength, if you're Lyon, and your opportunity is going against Boateng and whether it's Kimmich or Pavard. Not that it's easy by any means, but that's where I'm looking. If you want to poke a crack in Bayern's seemingly flawless armor, to me it's the right side of that defense. So can you get Memphis Depay in there? Can you get Cornet in there to cause some issues and do something like that first goal against Manchester City? Just get a ball over the top, make something happen. It's a tall task. I don't think they're going to be able to. I'm taking Bayern fairly comfortably. I say they win by multiple goals. But if Lyon has a chance, to me it's going to come on the right side of that Bayern defense, or a early red card or something, something weird. And especially because you don't go straight to PKs, Lyon has to hold on for 120 minutes to get this thing into penalties. And this Bayern team's just too confident, too determined. And quite frankly, I think they're kind of sick and tired of not winning this competition. That they look at themselves as they should be there every year. They should be in this position every year. And last couple, they haven't been up to par. So I don't see any slip from them. I think they're mentally just psychologically at a different level than Manchester City right now. You can shake Manchester City. You can't rattle Bayern. I really like Bayern's chances. And then MLS, non-FC Dallas Nashville version, also returns on Wednesday. Toronto's going to play Vancouver. This is sort of a staged restart, if you will. So the Canadian teams are playing each other, and the U.S. teams are playing in pods, essentially, to try and limit travel, to try and keep this as safe as possible. I still have questions as to whether this is actually feasible long term, but they're giving it a shot, doing everything they can to stay safe. I don't have all that much to say just because we haven't seen these two teams in a while. I like Toronto to win the game. They're the better team. But Vancouver also has some of their players back now that chose not to participate in MLS is back. And so this could be interesting just from the aspect of that Vancouver team left with confidence, and they overachieved just because they were so depleted. And now you get your Freddie Monteros, your Lucas Cavallini's back. And so maybe you're able to find a way to get a draw out of this or something. It's MLS, it's regular season, anything is possible. So that's your first game, and then we'll talk on Thursday this weekend and sort of moving forward specifically Thursday, Friday, is when this thing really gets rolling again. We got plenty of good matchups to talk about. That's all we've got today. Chris Brown, as always, coming up 1 p.m. Eastern right here on 110 Sports Live with Around the Bases. Josh Molnick's doing his thing tomorrow morning, 11 Eastern. Have fun. This is Champions League semis. The quarters were phenomenal. I hope we get the same level of drama and excitement. I'm not sure it's fair to expect it, but hopefully these are really good, entertaining games. Thank you for listening. We'll see you Tuesday. Sorry, we will not see you Tuesday. We will see you Thursday, as normal. And on Thursday, in addition to talking Champions League, we're going to do a little more of news and notes, sort of wrap up. There are other things that have happened these past couple days that we just didn't have time to get to today. I wanted to focus on the Champions League quarters and what happened and my takeaways. But, Rose Lavelle has now joined Sam Mewis in Manchester City. David Silva did not join Lazio, but joined Real Sociedad instead. So there are other things to talk. I'm sure more things will happen. Ronald Koeman might be official by that point. So you won't want to miss that. Thanks for listening. We'll see you Thursday.